The small town of Fairbrook was the kind of place where secrets never lasted long. Everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. But beneath its quiet streets and tidy lawns, grudges brewed like storms waiting to break. For years, the Thompson family had lived in a big white house at the end of Ashwood Lane, respected by many, feared by some, but always untouchable. They owned the largest construction company in the county, and with money came influence, enough to silence whispers, bend rules, and make problems disappear. At least, that's what they believed. Clara Dawson once trusted them. She was smart, hardworking, and determined to make something of herself. After college, she had landed a job at Thompson & Sons, excited to prove her worth. At first, they treated her like family. Mr. Thompson praised her work. His son Ryan often lingered by her desk with compliments that bordered on charming, and his wife Laura made a show of inviting Clara to dinner parties. It all seemed perfect until Clara realized that Ryan's attentions were not harmless flirtations. He wanted her. When she refused him, firmly but politely, things began to change. Documents went missing from her desk. Rumors spread that she was careless, unreliable. Projects she had worked late nights on were suddenly handed to someone else, credited to another's name. She could feel the walls closing in, but still, she endured, refusing to bend to their games. Then came the breaking point. One morning, Clara walked into the office to find Ryan leaning against her desk, smirking as police officers approached. They claimed they had received an anonymous tip about embezzlement. Files, emails, and signatures, all fabricated, were pinned on her. The scandal broke fast. Clara was dragged through courtrooms, her name smeared across town. Friends distanced themselves, afraid of being associated with her. Even after the charges were dismissed due to lack of evidence, the damage was done. No one wanted to hire her. She moved into a small apartment, surviving on odd jobs, living quietly while the Thompsons continued to thrive. Everyone said she should move on. But Clara had no intention of forgetting. She watched, she waited, and she learned. The Thompsons believed themselves invincible, but Clara understood something they never did. The higher people climb, the harder they fall, and she would be the one to pull the ground out from under them. It began subtly. A few carefully timed leaks to competitors, insider knowledge that Clara still remembered from her time at the company. Contracts slipped through their fingers, projects fell behind. Investors started asking questions. Clara made sure to remain a ghost in the shadows, never leaving a trace that led back to her. She created anonymous accounts, dropped damning evidence into the right inboxes, and whispered just enough into the right ears. When cracks began to show in their empire, Clara struck harder. She uncovered documents Ryan had hidden, proof of tax fraud and bribery, meticulously stored on drives he thought no one knew about. She delivered them anonymously to state investigators. Meanwhile, Laura Thompson's pristine image shattered when private recordings of her insulting clients surfaced mysteriously online. The town that once admired them now looked at them with suspicion, gossip swirling like wildfire. But Clara wasn't done. She wanted them to feel what she had felt, betrayal from every direction, isolation that cut deeper than any knife. So, she found their allies, business partners, friends, even distant relatives, and one by one, she fed them truths laced with poison. She showed them the Thompson family's lies, their selfish deals, their willingness to sacrifice anyone for their gain. Support dried up. Invitations stopped coming. The Thompsons, once untouchable, found doors slammed in their faces. The final blow came on a rain-soaked evening when news broke that Thompson & Sons was under federal investigation. Cameras swarmed the once proud White House as Ryan and his father were led out in handcuffs. Laura, standing at the doorway, could do nothing but watch as everything she had clung to unraveled in front of the world. Clara stood in the shadows of the crowd, umbrella in hand, her face unreadable. No one noticed her. No one connected her to the downfall.
She didn't need them to.
The satisfaction came not from recognition, but from the quiet knowledge that justice had finally found its way to those who thought they were beyond it. The Thompsons had destroyed her life once, but in their arrogance, They never saw the seeds of karma being planted in the silence of her suffering. And when those seeds grew, they became a storm that no one could escape. Clara walked away from the flashing lights and shouting reporters, her footsteps steady, her heart calm. Fairbrook was still the same small town it had always been, but everything had changed. The mighty had fallen, and for once, the scales felt balanced. Clara didn't stop walking when the handcuffs clicked shut on the Thompsons. She knew revenge wasn't always about one single strike. It was about watching the ripples spread, about seeing those who once sneered at you choke on the same poison they poured into your life. And as the weeks turned into months, the ripples she had started began to grow into waves that drowned the Thompsons completely. Ryan was the first to unravel. Prison stripped him of his swagger, his expensive suits replaced by uniforms that smelled of sweat and iron. The boy who once strutted through boardrooms, believing the world bent for him, now fought for scraps of respect among men who cared nothing for his name. Word leaked that he had been attacked inside, beaten for debts he could never repay. Clara heard it through hushed voices at the diner where she sometimes sipped her morning coffee, and she allowed herself a quiet smile. Laura tried to cling to her status, even as everything crumbled. She marched into town meetings, still trying to command authority, but nobody listened anymore. The same people who once envied her whispered behind her back, calling her arrogant, fake, pathetic. She withdrew into the mansion, curtains drawn, her once grand dinners now a memory. Slowly, she disappeared from sight, a ghost in her own home. Mr. Thompson, the patriarch, had always been the strongest, the one who truly believed in the family's invincibility. But even he broke under the weight of investigations, fines, and betrayals from old business partners who turned on him to save themselves. Clara never saw his face again, though she heard rumors, how he spent his days in silence, how his health failed under the strain, how the empire he built now lay in ashes. The town of Fairbrook shifted too. It had once worshipped the Thompsons, but people were quick to trade loyalty for self-preservation. The same neighbors who once turned their backs on Clara now muttered, "We always knew something wasn't right about them." The hypocrisy didn't surprise her. People loved the spectacle of downfall. They fed on it like vultures circling a carcass. Clara let them feast. But revenge is a strange companion. In the quiet nights, Clara sometimes lay awake, wondering if the satisfaction was enough. They had ruined years of her life, stolen her reputation, forced her into the shadows. Could their destruction really fill the emptiness they left behind? Yet every time doubt whispered in her ear, she remembered the laughter in Ryan's voice when the police dragged her away, the smug looks, the deliberate cruelty. And then she felt the calm again, the reminder that what she did wasn't cruelty, it was balance. Karma had simply chosen her as its hand. One autumn evening, long after the scandal had burned itself into the town's history, Clara walked past the Thompson estate. The windows were dark, the garden overgrown, the once bright paint peeling from the walls. A "for sale" sign leaned crookedly in the yard, beaten by wind and rain. She stopped at the gate, staring at the emptiness of it all. For years, that house had symbolized power, wealth, untouchable arrogance. Now it was just another decaying shell, like its owners. She breathed deeply, then turned away, her coat wrapped tight around her. The night air was cool, and for the first time in a long time, it felt light on her skin. Clara didn't need statues or applause, didn't need people to know the truth. Her story wasn't one of pity anymore, it was one of quiet, patient fire. The world might forget her name, but the Thompsons would never forget the shadow that undid them. And somewhere deep down, Clara knew that was enough. Clara's revenge had been executed with precision, but what came after was something she hadn't prepared for. She had spent years crafting every step, every detail, living and breathing only for the moment when the Thompsons would fall. And when they finally did, when the town's most powerful family was reduced to whispers and rubble, Clara found herself standing at a crossroads. For weeks, she lived quietly, as she always had, walking to the small library where she worked part-time, sipping tea in her tiny apartment, and watching the world go on as if nothing had changed. But inside, there was a shifting. She had proven to herself that she wasn't powerless, that she could strike back at those who wronged her. Yet with the hunger for revenge finally fed, she realized there was still a life ahead of her, one she had yet to claim. One day, Clara returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. It had no name, only her address scrawled across the front. Inside, there was a single note written in hurried handwriting. "You didn't just bring down the Thompsons. You gave this whole town a chance to breathe again. Thank you." No signature, just gratitude from someone who had lived in the Thompsons' shadow, just as she once had. Clara sat with that letter for a long time, her fingers trembling as she held it. She had always thought of her revenge as personal, a private war between herself and those who destroyed her. But now she understood. It wasn't just about her. The Thompsons had crushed many lives, manipulated many people. She had become the storm that freed them all. That realization lit something inside her. Slowly, Clara began to rebuild. She started teaching night classes in business ethics at the community center, sharing her knowledge and warning young professionals about the dangers of blind ambition. Her story spread in whispers, though no one ever tied her name directly to the downfall of the Thompsons. To the public, she was simply Clara Dawson, a woman who had been unfairly ruined but found the strength to rise again. To those who looked closer, she was something more, proof that injustice never lasted forever. And yet, the hunger for justice never truly left her. Clara saw how corruption thrived not only in Fairbrook but in towns beyond. She began quietly helping others who had been wronged, gathering evidence, connecting them with the right people, showing them how to fight back against those who believed themselves untouchable. She never sought credit, never revealed herself as the orchestrator. She became something like a ghost in the system, a silent hand of karma, guiding the scales to balance. The Thompsons, meanwhile, faded into history. Ryan was eventually released, but he returned to nothing, his name synonymous with disgrace. Laura left town, vanishing into some distant city where no one knew her. Mr. Thompson never recovered, his health declining until he, too, disappeared from the world. Their empire never rose again, their legacy nothing more than a cautionary tale. Years later, as Clara walked through the streets of Fairbrook, she noticed how different the air felt. New businesses thrived, families lived without fear of exploitation, and the once proud mansion at the end of Ashwood Lane had been torn down, replaced by a park where children played freely. No one spoke of the Thompsons anymore, not with reverence, not even with anger. They were forgotten, erased by time. But Clara knew, and she smiled, not out of bitterness or pride, but with a quiet, enduring peace. Her revenge had not just been an ending, it had been a beginning. She had become something the Thompsons could never understand, not just a survivor, not just a fighter, but the embodiment of karma itself. They never saw her revenge coming. And perhaps, neither would the next who thought themselves untouchable.